two makeup artists with fans in front of my face and down and everything. But it's like being a Formula One driver.
I'm gonna slaughter it right now because it feels so long ago. So it's moi ha coolio me you pourquoi.
The motion capture, the performance capture is a lot more similar to normal scene work than you might think.
I herald his beginning. I herald your end. I herald Galactus.
The costumes as well. I understand that you had an air vent or an air conditioning unit within your costume because it was so big. What was that?
But no, I didn't actually have an air conditioning vent. I had one of the AD team had a portable air conditioning unit with a tube, 10 inches diameter, and every time I was off set, because the lights were so bright to be able to shoot the character as a miniature, so it's super bright white light, very heavy costume. As soon as I start sweating, the game's over because you can't film on it. So I'm desperately there trying to keep cool enough not to sweat to be able to do it. So to do that, this guy would follow me around, and whenever they weren't turning, he'd have the air conditioning unit blowing cold air up the back of my armour. And I have two makeup artists with fans in front of my face and down and everything. But it's like being a Formula One driver. And I sit there and there's like one person taking each glove off at either side, and someone's taking your helmet off, and someone's sticking an air conditioner in his back. You've got like a minute and a half before, and you can see them setting up for the next shot, and you're thinking, right, okay, I'm not sweating, that's okay. I've nearly got my breath back. Okay, and gloves on, helmet on, and you're back on again. It's like that all day. Like, get absolutely exhausted and sit there and then go again.
Yeah. Julia, for you, I understood, obviously you had to learn some of an alien language to play this character. Obviously, you're not going to learn to play a fictional language fluently, but what was that process like of kind of, how do you kind of approach that kind of challenge?
You just learn the alien lines. I guess it's not like, I mean, it's complicated, but it's not that complicated. You just kind of, you have a dialect person and they tell you, they kind of make up a language and you hear how it sounds and you just learn it, I guess. So it was kind of fun though. I had fun with it.
Do you have like any particular phrases that you've kind of remembered that you like saying?
I'm gonna slaughter it right now because it feels so long ago. So it's, this moi ha coolio me you pourquoi. I think, yes, I think that's what it was.
Yeah, it sounds right to me.
Yes.
In terms of, obviously one of the key aspects is the family aspect of it, that these four characters are family. What was it like when you first kind of stepped into a room with your co-stars? What was the first meeting like? When did you first get to know each other?
Well, I'd met everybody separately, so there wasn't one, I didn't walk in and then all of a sudden, we were like together like that. The moment when we were all together for the four of us for the first time, Joe Pedro and I were on like at Pinewood doing some rehearsal, and we were looking for Vanessa, and she was at the gym, so we all sort of tracked her down and burst into her little training session, and that was our first moment together. I'll never forget that.
Yeah. Did you find that you very quickly kind of formed a bond, the four of you, while you were filming and while you were shooting scenes?
Yeah, I think it's one of the miraculous things. You never know what you're gonna get, but from the wisdom or instincts of the director Matt Shackman, I mean, we are like, these are three. My family is just expanded by three. I love these people very much.
Obviously, a big part of the film is the kind of retro futurist aesthetic, which harkens back to the Jack Kirby kind of style of the comic books as well. Yeah. What was it like kind of stepping into those sets? Were there any in particular that you really liked of the sets?
I love them all. There's a great Lower East Side set. There's an incredible Times Square set. The house itself, the Baxter building where they live, is a beautiful piece of set. I'd never been on anything so thorough and grand and impressive. Yeah.
We went to when we did the read-through and rehearsal day at the start. We read through and had a look around a lot of the sets that were built. Not all of them were completed at that time, but they had Yancey Street, which I really liked, which is where Ben Grimm's from and everything, and that was beautifully period accurate. With lovely details around the synagogue and stuff down there, putting it in the early 60s. So I love the kind of the period element of it, because I think any film is more interesting if it's not in the present day, in a sense. It just gives you another angle to look at things by. And so yeah, to have this set in the era when the stories were first written, I think it's great.
Yeah, I love that element of it, that it like is appearing from when it was first written in a way. I think that's really cool.
I read, to kind of get across the magnitude and the enormity of Galactus as a character, one of the things that you did was look at kind of footage of natural disasters and stuff like that. Can you talk a bit about that and how that helped you kind of get into character?
Well, it's trying to imagine him as a cosmic force rather than something that makes evil decisions, and his ability to cause destruction, and how you can see that is the force of nature. So it's quite easy to put things into Google and watch hurricanes, tornadoes, landslides, these kind of things that are beyond human control or comprehension, and trying to compare those to things that Galactus would do and how that would affect his size, so his breath, these kind of things. So yeah, it's all about trying to get your head around that level of destruction that humans could do nothing about.
Obviously, the Fantastic Four are characters that people care a lot about and people really love, and I think that extends to their villains and the foes as well. How kind of familiar with the comic books and the stories behind these characters were you before you both became involved in this?
Well, I wasn't super familiar, but then once I knew that this was the first comic books at Marvel and the first family. But once, I got the script and I got the email, I just thought it was such a great opportunity, and I was such a fan of Matt and the four of them. And so once I got it, I dove right into it and read all the comics, and I've seen the movies previously before, but but it's still different when you read the comics. But yeah.
I used to watch them as a kid. I read the comics as a kid, and through my son, who's 25 and really into Marvel and stuff, I've watched various stuff over the years. But then when I got the job, he'd say, put me in Marvel boot camp for at least a month to learn all about it before we started shooting. So it's always been part of my world, but not to the level that I needed to get it to play Galactus.
Yeah.
Respectfully,
Yes.
as it were. Yeah. To treat the subject matter with the respect it deserves because of the love it's got.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'm nervous before I start any job. This job has added pressure. There's so many people have deeply personal relationships with this comic book that's been around for so many years, since the early 60s. So many generations with meaningful, it's a comic book that came out of a deeply personal inspiration for Stan Lee and certainly Jack Kirby. And so, yeah, there's the gauntlet's thrown down. There's you want to honor people's expectations.
And in terms of the motion capture element of the performance, was that something quite different for you? How did that compare to kind of other acting that you've done in the past, and how does it change how you approach a character?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain he's obviously physically quite different from me, so there's things that you have to get in the performance and build in a certain physicality, different physics. But I think the motion capture, the performance capture is a lot more similar to normal scene work than you might think. I'm there, I'm working with the other actors, we're looking into each other's eyes, we're in the same room, we're there together. I think in many ways it would have been, it's a lot less interruptive than perhaps like a suit or something it might have been.
Yeah, what was your kind of first reactions to seeing footage and seeing bits of the film?
Oh, I mean, I'm very sort of, detail oriented and quite critical, but I thought it looked really good. You see it progresses, and so you can see it at 60% completion, 70. So when I first started getting the images, they were crude. They weren't as refined or nuanced as I would like them to be. So it's a little jarring, a little uncertain. But as we've gotten closer and closer to the release date, they've become really detailed, and it's hard to watch yourself, and it's hard for me to watch my performance in this, which makes me feel like it's pretty close to me.
Obviously, this isn't the first attempt to bring the Fantastic Four to the screen. We've seen other films in the past.
Sure.
Did you find it useful in any way to kind of study those previous films, in any sense, to kind of maybe see things that worked, maybe things that didn't, and how that might inform your own vision for this film?
Right, no, I definitely have seen those films and enjoyed them when they came out, but I didn't really turn to them as part of my prep for this. I was looking more at the comics. I'm a huge comic fan, and especially because we were choosing to set this in the 60s, this kind of retro future New York, I was looking more at the Kirby and Lee run, the initial Fantastic Four run in the 60s. That was my chief inspiration, but then just kind of figuring out how the Fantastic Four had been interpreted generation by generation, decade by decade, and then to figure out who these characters really were to me now and how my own personal experience informed who they were and how I wanted to bring them into the world. So definitely looking more at comics than the previous films.
Yeah, and you talk about that retro futurist aesthetic, and the design for the film is incredible from what we've seen so far. And I know, loads of sets were built, and it seemed like quite an incredible process.
Yes.
What were the biggest challenges for you in landing on the look of the film? What were this kind of breakthrough moments? And obviously you say inspired by Jack Kirby in the comic books, but were there any particular moments you thought we've landed on the right look here?
We wanted it to feel like it was where Jack Kirby, the original artist for the Fantastic Four, meets Stanley Kubrick. That was sort of our governing principle, where Kirby meets Kubrick. We wanted it to feel very grounded in a 60s New York, but also with that layer of retrofuturism. What did the people of the 60s imagine the future to look like? Which 2001 is kind of the perfect example of that. So that's where we started. And I wanted it not to feel like Tomorrowland, which felt like a completely fabricated fantasy world, but I wanted it to feel like New York. What I love about New York is the layers of history. When you go to New York, you can see each sort of decade built upon the decade before it. And so the idea was, let's introduce a New York that's been influenced by Reed Richards and the Fantastic Four. Reed Richards, the smartest man in the universe, who at a very early age was already pre-accident, before he became Mr. Fantastic, innovating in a way that was changing the world. He was Steve Jobs meets Einstein. He was inventing the Herbie robot, which is their version of the iPhone, well before anything that would have happened in our 60s. So it's that layer of the Reed Richards tech on top of a very familiar 60s New York.
Yeah, and obviously this design and the look is quite different from, I guess, other MCU films that we've seen as well. Do you have to kind of, on one level, think about how these characters can then fit into the existing MCU in future films and stuff, or is that not for you to worry about? Is that kind of...
Yeah, not for me to worry about. I was really trying to create a universe that felt completely unto itself, very special, trying to build a universe for these characters. And then wherever they go, that's for them, that's for their journey. And part of that's the fun, in the same way that it was great to meet Captain America, Steve Rogers, back in World War II, and then you see him a fish out of water in the present day, trying to figure out how he fits in with the Avengers. And so they will have their own fish out of waterness as they head off into meeting Avengers in the future.